Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to share with you the story of Hatchet, a remarkable tale of survival in the wild. In this session, we'll explore not only the gripping adventure, but also learn some English along the way through reading. We'll cover the key moments of the story and discuss the lessons it offers. So, let's get started and dive into this incredible journey. Let's start with the journey that begins with Brian's ordeal. The author behind this story is Gary Paulsen, a renowned writer who has experienced life in the woods, raced dogs in Alaska, and faced tough situations all alone. Just like Brian, Gary has lived through many challenging adventures, which adds authenticity to the story. Now, focusing on the main character, Brian Robeson. He's just a 13-year-old boy, but he's thrown into a situation that tests his courage and resilience. The crisis that sets everything in motion is a plane crash in the Canadian wilderness. Imagine being suddenly stranded far from help, with very few resources. The only tool Brian has with him is a hatchet, a gift from his mother. This simple tool becomes incredibly important, as it's his primary means of survival. It's not just an axe, it symbolizes hope and the ability to adapt. The core challenge Brian faces is to survive alone in the wild. He must learn to find food, build shelter, and stay safe, all without any rescue coming immediately. And here's a question to think about. How can careful observation and resilience help a person survive? Throughout this story, Brian's ability to observe his surroundings and stay determined will be key to overcoming the hardships he faces. Finally, this slide emphasizes Brian's only tool, the hatchet. It's more than just a weapon. It's a symbol of his resourcefulness and the hope that keeps him going in the face of adversity. So, what makes a story fall into the category of realistic fiction? Well, the main purpose is to entertain us with a story that feels believable. The characters and events, although imaginary, are crafted in a way that they seem real and relatable. It's about creating a world that could exist, even if it's not real at the moment. When we look at the plot, the sequence of events could actually happen in real life, making the story feel authentic. The setting is also important. It might be a real place or something that could be real, like the Canadian wilderness, which helps ground the story in reality. And then there's the theme, the message the author wants to share. For example, it might be about how self-pity doesn't help, or that observation and resilience are key to overcoming challenges. Now, think about how realistic fiction compares to fantasy or informational texts. Fantasy often involves elements that are completely impossible, like magic or mythical creatures, while informational texts aim to teach us facts. Realistic fiction stands out because it feels possible, even if it's made up. Take Hatchet, for example. Even though it's a fictional story, the events, setting, and characters make it feel very real. That's what makes realistic fiction so powerful. We can see ourselves in these stories and learn from them as if they're actual experiences. Now, let's talk about a particularly intense moment in Brian's survival story, what I like to call a night of terror, the porcupine attack. It all started when Brian was inside his shelter, trying to rest, but suddenly, he heard a strange slithering sound right near his feet. Imagine how terrifying that must have been, suddenly hearing something moving in the darkness. Without thinking, Brian kicked out instinctively and threw his hatchet toward the sound. The hatchet missed its mark and hit the rocks with a shower of sparks. But the real pain came immediately. His leg was torn with a sharp, stabbing sensation, as if 100 needles had driven into it. When he finally took a closer look at his leg, he discovered what had caused all this chaos. A porcupine had stumbled into his shelter. And when Brian kicked the animal, it responded by slapping him with its tail of quills. 8 of those sharp quills were now embedded through his pants and into the flesh of his calf. This moment highlights how unpredictable nature can be and shows the importance of staying calm and resourceful, even in frightening situations. So, what will Brian do now? How will he handle this pain and fear? We'll find out in the next part of his story. Now, let's focus on what might be the most important lesson Brian learns in this story. Self-pity doesn't work. This is a crucial psychological turning point for him. As he sits alone in the dark with his aching leg and the relentless mosquitoes finding him again, Brian starts crying. He thinks to himself, "I can't take it this way, and I can't do this." He cries until he's completely cried out. This moment is significant because it shows that feeling sorry for himself doesn't change anything. When he's done crying, nothing has really improved. His leg still hurts, it's still dark, and he's still alone. The self-pity has accomplished nothing. This is where the real shift happens. Brian realizes that emotions alone won't save him. He needs to focus on action, on observing his situation carefully, and on solving problems. This psychological shift, moving from despair to determination, is just as important as any physical tool he has. Now, a couple of words to note. Brian touches his quills gingerly, meaning carefully or with great caution. And when he's trying to start a fire or when tools hit the rocks, they often sputter, giving out small popping sounds. These details help us understand how he's slowly but surely learning to adapt and survive. Let's take a closer look at dreams and revelation, the key to finding the answer. In the dream sequence, we see two important figures. First, his father appears in a living room, trying to communicate something significant through gestures and lip movements, but no sound comes through. It's as if he's trying to send a silent message. Next, his friend Terry is at a barbecue pit, pouring charcoal and starter fluid, then lighting it. He repeatedly points to the fire, almost as if he's saying, "See." A fire. Both of these figures are trying to tell Brian something crucial, but what exactly is it? This leads us to the breakthrough. When Brian wakes up in the morning light, he suddenly remembers throwing the hatchet at the porcupine. The hatchet hit the stone wall and created a shower of sparks. That moment is so important because it reveals that the hatchet was the key to everything. Somehow, he could generate fire from the hatchet. Those sparks could produce a flame. This realization is what we call the spark that changes everything. It's a turning point, connecting the dots between his dreams and the practical solution he needs. It shows how insight can come from unexpected places and how symbols in our dreams often point to real-world answers. In the context of the overall story, it highlights the importance of paying attention to our subconscious messages and how they can lead us to breakthrough moments. Let's walk through the process from spark to flame. First, we have the tool. Brian is striking the rock, which is a dark, hard stone similar to flint, embedded right in the shelter wall. He's using a hatchet to strike it, aiming to create sparks. When he hits the rock just right, the result is a shower of sparks, golden and bright, that fly through the air and even land on the sand beneath. This shows that the tool and method can generate the sparks needed to start a fire. However, there's a problem. Those tiny sparks don't last long. They sputter and die almost immediately after they appear. This is a critical point because sparks alone aren't enough. They need something to catch on, something soft, fine, and fluffy, like tinder or kindling, to ignite into a flame. And here's where the challenge comes in. Brian needs to find or create that tinder quickly. So, what will he try next? Will he succeed or face more failed attempts? Stay tuned as we continue to see how he overcomes this obstacle and makes that breakthrough. Now, this slide highlights the critical challenge Brian faces in his fire-making journey, finding the right tinder. After successfully creating sparks by striking the rock with his hatchet, the next step is to catch those sparks on something soft, fine, and fluffy, something that can ignite easily. This is a vital part of the process because sparks alone aren't enough. They need a material to catch fire from. We see Brian's attempts so far: dried grass, small twigs, even a mix of both. But unfortunately, each has failed. Dried grass is too coarse and brittle. The sparks just die when they land on it. Small twigs are even worse. They cause the sparks to sputter out faster. And mixing grass with twigs doesn't help either. The sparks still can't ignite the material. The key concept here is the importance of tinder, something that can ignite from those tiny sparks. It's a painstaking process, requiring careful attention and persistence. And then there's that moment of realization. Brian's so close that he knows there must be a material out there that's fine enough, soft enough, and fluffy enough to catch these precious sparks and start a fire. It's a reminder that finding the right tinder is often the hardest part, but also the most crucial in the fire-making process. So this slide is all about Brian's breakthrough, which I like to call nature's tinder. The key problem he faced was finding something soft, fine, and fluffy enough to catch tiny sparks from his fire-starting efforts. He needed the perfect material to help ignite his fire, but what could that be? Now, here where his keen observation comes into play. Brian noticed white birch trees with bark peeling off. He described it as looking like clean, slightly speckled paper. And what's interesting is that paper itself is flammable, so he wondered, could this peeling bark work as tinder? The solution he came up with was quite clever. He carefully shredded the dry birch bark into a ball of fluff, making it fine enough to catch those tiny sparks. And after 2 hours of patient, meticulous work, he finally succeeded. And that's the highlight, his first successful fire. This moment really encapsulates how observation, determination, and using natural resources can lead to survival. It shows that paying close attention to the natural world can unlock solutions to problems we face. So, to sum up, the birch tree's peeling bark became his perfect tinder, proving that sometimes nature has the answers if you just look closely. Let's take a closer look at analyzing point of view in Hatchet. The story is told from a third-person limited perspective. This means the narrator uses third-person pronouns like he, him, his, she, and her, but doesn't use I or we. One of the key benefits of this perspective is that it allows us to see into Brian's mind, his thoughts, feelings, and internal experiences through internal monologue. This perspective reveals Brian's inner voice directly, giving us insight into what he's thinking and feeling at any moment. However, it also has a limited scope. It only shows us what Brian himself perceives, hears, or thinks. We don't get access to other characters' inner thoughts, only Brian's. For example, when we read a passage like, "The pain filled his leg now," and with it came new waves of self-pity. Sitting alone in the dark, his leg aching, some mosquitoes finding him again, he started crying. We see how the narrator reveals both Brian's physical pain and his emotional state. This is only possible because the story is told from a third-person limited point of view. Now let's consider a practice question. Which sentence best shows the narrator revealing Brian's inner thoughts? The correct answer is C. So fast, he thought. So fast things change. This sentence uses internal monologue to directly share Brian's thoughts, making it clear how he's feeling about the rapid changes he's experiencing. Understanding this point of view helps us connect more deeply with Brian's experience and gives us a window into his inner world, making the story more personal and engaging. All right, let's take a moment to test what we've learned about these vocabulary words from Hatchet. On this slide, you'll see 5 words, and your task is to match each one with its correct definition. This activity helps reinforce your understanding and ensures you're familiar with the key language used in the story. For example, gingerly means doing something carefully or cautiously, which is important when the character is handling delicate situations. Ignite refers to starting a fire or setting something on fire, a crucial concept given the survival theme. Sputtered describes the sounds made when something is crackling or popping, often indicating weak or inconsistent sounds, like an engine or a fire. Painstaking means doing something with a lot of care and attention to detail, showing how important precision is in survival scenarios. And gratified means feeling satisfied or pleased, often after accomplishing something difficult. Understanding these words not only helps you grasp the story better, but also builds your vocabulary for describing actions, feelings, and situations. Remember, the goal here is to connect each word to its meaning, which will make the story more vivid and relatable when you read or listen to it. Keep practicing these connections, and you'll strengthen both your comprehension and your language skills. Let's do a quick check to see how well we've understood the story. I'll ask a few questions, and I want you to think about Brian's experiences and survival strategies as you answer in complete sentences. First, what was Brian's initial reaction to the porcupine attack, and how did he feel afterward? Remember to consider his feelings of fear, pain, and what he experienced in the dark shelter. Next, what did Brian learn was the most important rule of survival. And why was this lesson so crucial? Think about how he discovered the dangers of self-pity and how that affected his chances of survival. Then, how did Brian's dreams of his father and his friend Terry help him solve his biggest problem? Consider what they were trying to show him and the realization he came to through those dreams. Finally, let's talk about the hatchet. Describe the role it played in Brian's survival and why it was so important. Reflect on all the ways Brian used the hatchet throughout his journey and how it became a key tool for him. These questions highlight some of the most important lessons about resilience, resourcefulness, and self-reliance that are central to the overall theme of this story. Now, let's take a deeper look at inference and theme. We'll start with some higher-order thinking questions. First, consider the inference question. Why did the author choose to use a dream to reveal Brian's fire secret? Think about the emotional significance of that dream, how it connects to memory and guidance, and how dreams often represent our subconscious mind working through problems. What does that dream tell us about Brian's relationship with his father? Next, moving on to the theme question. How did Brian demonstrate observation and resilience? Look for moments where he observed things like the porcupine, the sparks, or the birch trees. Notice how he showed resilience through pain, persistence, and learning from his failures. Now, think about how observation and resilience work together in survival. Observing carefully helps us respond better, and resilience keeps us going despite challenges. Finally, let's connect this to personal experience. When have you noticed something small that solved a big problem? Maybe it was a tiny detail in nature, a pattern in a situation, or something someone said that you initially overlooked. How did that observation change the outcome? And a quick discussion tip: share your answers with a partner. Listen to different perspectives, and you might gain new insights from how others interpret these ideas. So, in this final slide, I want to talk about what I call the survivor's mindset and what Brian's journey teaches us about resilience and mental toughness. You see, surviving in the wilderness isn't just about having the right tools or physical strength. It really requires mental toughness, being able to stay calm, observe carefully, and keep trying even when things seem impossible. For example, Brian's keen observation of his surroundings, like noticing the sparks from the fire and identifying the birch trees, actually leads him to breakthrough solutions. It shows how paying close attention can make all the difference in a tough situation. Resilience is also a key part of this mindset. Brian doesn't give up after failing a few times. Instead, he learns from each mistake and keeps trying. That resilience, that ability to bounce back and try again, is what helps him survive. And then there's mindset. Brian realizes that feeling sorry for himself doesn't help at all. Instead, he shifts his focus to action, finding solutions and problem solving. This shift in thinking is crucial because it keeps him moving forward, no matter how dire things seem. Finally, I want to encourage you to read the full book, Hatchet, by Gary Paulsen. There, you'll discover more about the challenges Brian faces, how he continues to survive, and what he learns about himself in the wilderness. It's an inspiring story that reminds us all to observe the world more carefully and to face our own challenges with resilience. So, I invite you to begin your own adventure, because developing this survivor's mindset can help you overcome obstacles and grow stronger, no matter what challenges come your way.